to give y'all a little hoodoo story time. So this story I was actually told by my dad and my grandma. And this was about the time my dad was fighting a case and he was about to get sent to one of the worst prisons in Louisiana. So boom, my dad's about to fight a case. He's trying to figure out like how can he get out of it, like, oh what you and my grandma knew there's a lady in Louisiana. And she was the lady everybody used to go to when you needed work done. So the lady told her to get petition paper and put the judge's name on there. I think she said like 6, 7 times, and then put my dad's name 6, 7 times and write what you wanted to happen 6, 7 times over that, and put it in his right shoe. So boom, my dad gets to the freaking mind y'all, my dad walked on a judge for about 3 to 5 days. Okay, cool. He gets to the point where he needs to be sentenced. I kid y'all not. From both of their words, the judge got up in there and like fell asleep. The judge fell asleep like in the middle of my dad's case. He just fell asleep, and the judge woke up and literally told my dad to just go home. I cannot make this up. I got the story from my grandma and my dad. So if anybody's like hoodoo isn't real, this isn't real, let me tell you something, baby. I done seen some stuff and it's definitely real. So get into your culture, baby. All right.
Ask and you shall receive. I have a story submission from Namibia. We'll call the person that submitted this spooky story Sienna. And this tragic story was her younger sister's story. Now, Sienna insisted that she had a beautiful childhood. She said her family was considered a little bit more upper class out there, and so she had opportunities. She said she didn't grow up necessarily poor. She said they had a nice house as far as she always knew, a big back space, and all the children from the neighborhood would come and they would play together. She said something that was extremely rare though within the people that she lived around. Since she lived in a nice neighborhood, everybody else in that neighborhood pretty much were in the same class as them. But one thing that Sienna's family had that the rest of the block did not was her entire family, including Sienna herself, although she was just 9 years old at the time, already had their passport and visa. And so they were able to travel internationally, which is basically looked at as a major thing if you don't have the means to do it. She mentions that whenever her parents would go on vacation, she would have this aunt that would come over and watch her. Now, it would either be her grandmother or her aunt, but then at some point her grandmother started getting too old, so her aunt took over and her aunt would be the one mainly watching her. Right before Sienna turns 10, she finds out that her mother is pregnant and they're expecting a little girl. Sienna says she was never excited about the idea. Even after her little sister was born, she liked being the only child. But she didn't reckon that she would care when it was absolutely way too late. She said her mother had a very healthy pregnancy. She even had a home birth and she bounced back and everything was great. She had a healthy baby. Now, as I mentioned, the dynamics in the home for Sienna was just a little bit different because she wasn't used to having, the attention split. But she didn't hate the idea of it because she started to see her mom more often because her mom started to stay home to take care of the baby. So fast forward a year, now the baby is 12 months. Sienna's mother decides to go back to her duties, which would mean that the aunt would be coming back to watch them. Sienna described her aunt as a beautiful woman who would never hurt a fly. She remembers her aunt being very nurturing and very loving. She says there's something about her aunt that just draws you to her. Man, woman, and child, she just had that factor about her. Now, it could have been her astonishing beauty. Point is, they didn't believe that this woman was capable of hurting a fly. Now, fast forward to 6 months into the aunt watching the children. Now, I guess at this point, the baby would be 18 months. Now, keep in mind, the aunt wasn't watching them for 6 months straight at a time. Like, she would come to the house and then leave and then come back, She would come on a as-needed basis. Fast forward 6 months into that, the mom starts having these weird dreams about her toddler. She had a dream that a doll came to life in her daughter's room, and the doll walked up to her daughter while her daughter was sleeping. She described the doll, by the way, to look like a weird, fucked up version of Chucky. The doll laid its hands on the baby and whispered something, and then the mother woke up. She woke up to her baby crying, just profusely just crying. And Sienna, who was in the house, described it as like one of the most piercing sounds that like she's ever heard come out of her baby sister. She was nonstop crying for hours. And they stayed up with the baby trying to comfort this baby. And they watched this baby right in front of their eyes turn purple. And they've also watched that baby take its very last breath. After crying for literal hours, it stopped. And they described the silence to be deafening. Unfortunately, the baby was pronounced dead, and it just raised a lot of questions because this was a perfectly healthy baby. What happened? And of course, they're thinking that this has to be witchcraft or voodoo related. And they've looked at everyone around them and they just could not figure out who would do something like that for the life of them. Exactly a year after her baby sister passed away, it was strange how her aunt, who used to take care of them, she was relatively poor. She didn't have nearly as much as Sienna's mother did. I mean, she took care of her children. Sienna's mother was living a pretty good life in comparison. And while Sienna's mother, she married into wealth. So Sienna's dad was the one with the status. But a year later, after they lost their daughter, they watched this woman go from living in this disheveled, like ugly, broken down house to basically a mansion. She's managed to get herself a car. She moved out of the town that she was staying in. She went from rags to riches. She now has a passport, she's also traveling, and she seems to be doing really well for herself out of nowhere. Watching their aunt's life change, and nothing triggered the change. Like, she didn't marry anyone new, she didn't get a new job. Like, where is all this wealth coming from? It hit Sienna's mom. And when the news hit Sienna's mom, she just could not believe that her own sister would sacrifice her child. And she did it for nothing short of wealth and riches. But remember that if you do evil, at some point your own acts will always catch up to you. Because shortly after, the aunt started suffering from an uncurable disease. She said, we'll call it cancer. She struggled for years and wound up passing away 5 years after that. Now, Sienna believes that her mother probably had something to do with that. But yeah, that is the story. This one was really sad. Thank you so much for submitting your story. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys like this story, make sure you like the video. Make sure you also share it and you follow me on this here app. And then where it says Instagram on top of my page, click that. Both my Instagram and my YouTube link will pop up. I have so many long, good stories on YouTube that are waiting for you guys to listen. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and while you're at it, follow me on Instagram just so that I know that it's real, as I will be telling a more in-depth version of this story on my YouTube channel. Alright, I love you, my abducted humans. Ciao.
A lot of people walking around with curses and spells put on them and they don't even know it. Let me give y'all the sauce to figure out if somebody put a curse or a spell on you. Stop thinking that you have to go to somebody for assistance to get a reading done or divination work done just to see if there's a spell or curse on you. You are the tools, you are the key. It's just that they're more tapped in than you are at that moment. But that doesn't mean that you can't do things for yourself. So if everywhere you turn, things are just not going right, you are having issues with your health out of nowhere, like if you just literally feel like something is wrong, something is off, just go ahead and check to see if there's a spell or curse. It does not hurt anything. I'd rather know. I don't know about y'all. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to get a bowl. Fill that bowl with water. Get you 2 matches. It could be the matches that we use, those wooden matches, just as long as they're 2 matches. Put them in the bowl of water. Do not light them. If those matches stay separate, then you good. No spell work has been done against you. But if those matches touch, somebody tried to put a spell or curse on you, but it didn't work because your protection is too strong. But if those matches cross, somebody has definitely put a spell or curse on you. You can also do an egg cleanse. If you haven't heard of that, if you want more information, just let me know and I can drop a video on that. Yes, start doing things for yourself. Stop thinking you have to wait or pay your money or go meet with somebody to tell you about you. Like I told y'all in my Voodoo video, just find out what resonates with you in your culture, in your background, and participate in that. Because whether people want to admit it or not, spiritual warfare is real. I'm not scared or afraid of anything that I can see. It's the unseen that we should be concerned about. Let me know if y'all have questions and let me know y'all thoughts. Peace, love, and light, and gratitude for watching.
Have you guys ever heard the story of Julia Brown? She sang a song that went something like this. One day when I die, I'm gonna take all of you with me. This is the curse of Julia Brown. Now it's important to note that some people said she did hoodoo, others say she did voodoo. I don't really know which one, so I'm just gonna say voodoo. Julia Brown was born around 1845 in a really small town called Fraynor in Louisiana. Now, this town was very poor. The population was really small, which meant that this town had no doctors. The only thing that was in this town that you can compare to modern technology was just a small train station. But this train station was used to bring goods from New Orleans to this town. That's all it was used for. So when locals in this town would get sick, they had no doctors to turn to. That is where Julia Brown came in, also known as Aunt Julia. She was basically a voodoo priestess, and she would heal people with her voodoo practices and her voodoo medicine. And over time, she gained lots of respect because whenever locals would get sick, instead of having to travel all the way to the city, which they didn't have no means to do so anyway, they would just go to Julia. And this is how she became known. Others also say that they were passed by and they would see Julia sitting on her porch in a rocking chair singing eerie, dark songs. But nonetheless, when people would get sick, they would turn to Aunt Julia. However, because of this, Aunt Julia became very popular and lots of people wanted to be healed by her, which means that she was only one person. She didn't have the ability to heal the whole entire town. And because of this, locals started getting really upset and they were kind of demanding that they heal her, often taking Aunt Julia for granted. It was said that they would go to Julia's porch and pull her out of her front door to demand them to heal her. It was also said that when people didn't heal Aunt Julia, they started spreading rumors about her and just basically taking her work for granted. Julia did not like this at all, and because of this, she started basically predicting bad omens to happen to the town locals. So she started predicting certain things that would happen to these people that was taking her for granted. And that is exactly what happened. On September 29th, 1915, Julia Brown passed away. Now, days before she passed, she knew her death was coming, which is where locals said they would walk by her front porch and walk by her home, and they would hear her singing a strange song. The song went, "One day when I die, I'm gonna take all of you with me." At the funeral of Julia Brown, all the town locals gathered to bury Julia. Some of them were also kind of relieved because they wanted Julia to be gone because they didn't want her eerie energy around the town anymore. While they were nailing down her coffin, a hurricane hit and heavy rain started to pour over the entire town. This caused the locals to run back inside their homes and try to take shelter, but that didn't work. 25 locals hid inside the train station, but that also didn't work. Everyone ended up passing from this horrific hurricane. It's said that only a few locals survived, which is how the story and the legend of Julia Brown started to surface. I think if you go there today, I'm not sure what's there. I think I've heard a few people say that it's a burial ground and that when you go there, you can hear Julia singing. And people also said that it's really haunted. So that's just a little bit of the story of the case of Julia Brown. I read it last night and it was pretty creepy. This is very brief. I just want to go over what Julia did, the song she sang, and kind of how it all happened. But yeah, guys, let me know if you want me to do more stories like this because I like telling stories.
This girl, Kat Reston, this is her Twitter account. She drowned in her bathtub under mysterious circumstances, allegedly, because, her friends say, she was doing voodoo rituals without any sort of training. So Kat was not initiated. She was not trained to be part of any voodoo house. Voodoo is a religion, but it's a closed system, which means that you need to actually find a teacher. You can't just read a book. You can't just watch a couple of YouTube videos. You need to spend years under the tutelage of an actual teacher who's gone through it before. Same way that I can put on a priest outfit, but that doesn't mean that I'm a Catholic priest unless I go through the training. If I'm not a Catholic priest and I do Catholic Mass, will I die? Probably not, but I wouldn't risk it because I'm not trained. The same way that I wouldn't risk driving down the highway 150 miles an hour. I'd probably crash, but if I was a race car driver, I probably wouldn't crash. See the difference?
Disclaimer, I don't know what took this girl out. But for the sake of this video, let's just say it was voodoo. It's a closed practice for a reason. If you were not born or invited into voodoo, hoodoo, vodou, santeria, don't touch it. It's not witchcraft, nor is it pagan. The Loa are not gods. They're spirits who serve the one God. And they're not your friends either. I'm of West African descent. I have family in Virginia and in Louisiana. And yes, we're Creole. I was born into it. It's in my bloodline. I met this one white boy last year who told me he tried to summon Agwe The Loa of the Sea was some fucking internet ritual. A ritual he said he was too lazy to finish. His family got hit with bad nightmares and the paranormal. And I asked him, why did he need such a powerful Loa? I don't remember, TBH. I was kinda just fucking around with something I shouldn't have played with like a toy. This is Papa Legba, the Loa of Crossroads. This is not Papa Legba, this is the Baron. He's basically our Grim Reaper. Appropriation can be fatal. Black culture is not a toy. And if you can't respect that, then I'm not obliged to care about what happens to you.
I'm from Louisiana, so I know about voodoo. I deeply know about it. In Louisiana, we don't play about that shit. Like, that's one topic, one thing we don't fucking play about. People are so sleep on the fact that people really play with voodoo. You probably really have somebody putting voodoo on your life and you don't even know because you sleep on the fact that that shit is real, but it's really fucking real. And it's really people out here that is so fucking miserable that they sitting around doing that shit to people.
Is there any way to know if you are under a voodoo spell?
You really have to go to a voodoo lady, and even if that's something you don't believe in, that's something everybody should do. I don't care if you don't believe in that shit. You might don't believe in it, but it's people out here that don't fucking like you that believe in it, that's putting that shit on you, and you going through hell in life, and you wondering where the fuck is all this hell coming from?
I've seen what voodoo can do.
I used to be a
Part
therapist
1.
in a male correctional facility. I've seen some crazy shit, and I just like talking to y'all about it. So this story is rather short, but I thought it was worth talking about. So there was this older gentleman who was an inmate. He was older guy, African American. We could just call him Mr. K. I'm not really sure where Mr. K was originally from or is originally from, but I know that he resided in Alabama, so he might be from here. I don't know, but anyway. So he claimed to be a voodoo priest or some kind of, I don't know if he was like claimed to be a priest, but I know for sure that he practiced voodoo, or he claimed to practice voodoo. So prior to this incident, I had only met Mr. K one time, and that was when I was first started working at the job. So I had walked past him. I think I was going to like the records room or something, and he was sitting on the bench. And so when I walked past the second time, he stopped me, and he was basically like, "Who are you? I never seen you here before." So I introduced myself. I was like, "Hey, my name is Miss Driver. I'm one of the new ATs that just started here, blah, blah, blah." So I was like, "Who are you?" So he told me his name, told me what he was in for, murder, and how long he had. I can't remember how long he had, but it wasn't life, but he got a long ass time. He has a long ass time to go, and he has already been in there for a long time. Like, when I say that man is older, like he's on a cane kind of old, but nonetheless. So we introduced ourselves, and then I told him, I was like, well, if you ever, want to just get out the dorm, or if you ever want to come and have a session, whether it's individual or group sessions, please feel free. I don't turn anyone down. You're free to come into any of my sessions. He did share with me that he usually doesn't come to groups and things like that because he, in his word, finds it to be a bunch of bullshit, which I respect it. But he was like, "But I actually give you a try because you were actually nice to me." And I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, come on. I'm not going to be rude to you, So he asked if he could, when are my sessions held? And I told him, you could come to the morning session, which is at 8:15. You can go to the middle one, which is during lunchtime, like 12:15. And then you can come to the last one, which is like 2:30 or whatever. And so he said, "I'll come to the 12:15 one." So I was like, "Okay, see you then." So he ended up doing this. He said he came to the one of my sessions, and at that particular session I had a very small group. It was only like 4 including him. So I know that when we're getting ready to have our guys come down, we have to write their names on the list, give it to the officers. The officers have to go get them or call for them, and then they come down. So I gave the officer my list, and he saw Mr. K's name on it, and he was like, "He's coming to your group?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He was like, "He's on your list?" I was like, "Well, I just added him. He said that he would come, so I just put him on my list." And he was like, Do you know who this man is? To make a long story short, Mr. K had been in there for a very long time, and he was known to be very violent, very aggressive. Like, he used to beat the officers' asses and stuff like that when he was in his prime. So he was kind of like forbidden to come to groups because of how violent he was. Yet that day was the first time he had been to group in like years. So they were just like shocked or whatever. But they was like, we'll come if you want us to bring them, we'll bring them, but you know, we're gonna be, you know, on standby just in case. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's your job, you know. Mr. K was no issue for me at all. He participated in the session very well. He actually got comfortable to open up, you know, everything that I want in like the perfect client he gave. But shit got a little different further on down in the session. And I say different because it's not something I'm used to. You know, I'm not saying that it's bad or good or evil. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's different because it's not my, you know, not my usual day-to-day thing. So the session, the overall topic of the session was anger management. So I asked them a question. I was like, how do you guys deal with your anger? How do y'all deal with, like, if you have a conflict with somebody? And I wanted them to tell me how they usually go by, you know, go by things when they're angry or when they got beef with somebody, this and that. And then once that's all on the table, I wanted to introduce them to some healthy coping skills of how, you know, you can do things differently to get a different result. So some of my guys was like, oh, Miss Driver, when I get angry or when I got beef with somebody, you know, we go at it, we fight, we argue, you know, blah, blah, blah. When it got to Mr. K's turn, it was just so different. So I'm like, Mr. K, how do you deal with being angry? How do you deal with conflict with someone, right? Mr. K said, I'll show you. So he gets up out of his chair, right? So I'm like, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, he's finna get violent. He about to, you know what I'm saying? So I like he's an old man, so he's getting up with his cane and everything, but like that don't mean shit. So I'm like, okay, all right. I'm looking for like an exit plan or something to where I can defend myself or whatever, right? So I just sit here and I'm like, okay, so the door right there, I could just jet out the door like in there. And then I was like, I got this chair over here, so in case. So he gets up and he reaches in his pocket, his back pocket. My mind instantly like, he finna fucking stab us all. This is the day, Lord. But instead, he pulls out a little tin can, like a little about that big, little tin can, right? So he gets it out, he put it in his hand, he shakes it, and he got something in it. It sounds like beads or something. So he sits down and he just puts the can on the table. So I look at him, he looking at me, and I'm like, what's that? What you got in there? And he said, this is what I use whenever somebody's fucking with me. What's in it? Mr. K takes the lid off of the can and he throws chicken bones that was in the can all on the table. They just scattered everywhere. Chicken bones. And that is when I learned that Mr. K practiced voodoo. Right? Different. I know that's in our culture, you know, but like I said, I'm not familiar with voodoo. I've done some research on it because I am interested in like different cultures and whatnot and how people do things regarding religion or spirituality. But personally, I've never, practiced voodoo or anything like that. So everything that I just shared with you guys is the very first encounter that I had with Mr. K. But now I'm going to fast forward to the actual incident that Mr. K caused, but I gotta do it in part 2. I'm sorry. Stay tuned. Okay, so I told y'all part 2 was loading, but I guess it's too long. So y'all came from my head in part 1 in the comments saying that my shit was too long. So I really am going to try to work on it. I really am. But until then, you get what you get. So to finish the story, one day I come to work. I get to work, and as I'm walking to the office, I hear somebody screaming for their life. I walk closer to the classroom, and I see a dude on a table with no shirt on, and his back just ate the fuck up. I don't know. He looked like he been stabbed, cut, burned, something. I don't know. So the nurses and the other medical staff are all surrounding him, trying to heal whatever the fuck happened to his back or something like that. And I see that the nurses and everybody just like overwhelmed and confused, and they're cussing, and they kept saying, I don't know what the fuck is happening. I don't know what the hell's going on. So I'm black, so I just keep walking, minding my business. Eventually, the nurses come in to where we're at, and she's still overwhelmed and still like spazzing out or whatever because of, I guess, what she witnessed. So homeboy's back was like messed up or whatever, and as they was tending to his wounds, she claimed that there were more wounds appearing on his skin out of nowhere. So the cause of this situation, this young man and two other young men had jumped on Mr. K and, just beat his ass pretty much. And I think Mr. K got like one lick in with his cane. He knocked the dude out with his cane or some shit like that. But after he did that, everybody else just started jumping on him and just beat his ass. So eventually, the officers and lieutenant broke it up, and those who needed it got the medical attention. And the lieutenant was interviewing Mr. K to see what the fuck was happening. And his response is what kind of like shook everybody the fuck up. So apparently they got the beef got started because the young guy came up to Mr. K and was like, you owe me, pay me. And Mr. K was like, I already paid you. I paid you last week. What are you talking about? And the dude was adamant, like, no, I charge interest, so you got to pay me interest too. Mr. K was pretty much like, you full of shit, get the fuck out of my face. So that's what caused the fight, and the boy getting knocked the hell out by the cane, and Mr. K getting jumped by the young man. So apparently later that night, I think it happened like around 3 in the morning, maybe 2. I don't know. I wasn't there. The young man was sleeping. And he was sleeping on his back, and one of the witnesses said that he just woke up out of nowhere screaming and spazzing out, and everybody just looking like, is it crack? So as this happened, people like looked, but they really didn't pay attention, because apparently when the inmates are either on like flocka or ice drugs, then they will wig out in that same manner. So they really didn't pay attention to it, but they said that they started calling for the guards when he jumped up out of bed and saw that his whole blood, fuck, am I having a stroke? It's coming from the pressure y'all telling me to make my story short. He jumped out of bed, and when he did that, they looked at his bed and saw blood on his bed. Fuck. When they saw the blood, almost everybody in the dorm was like ran to his aid to see what was going on. But the witness said that he looked over at Mr. K, and Mr. K was sitting up on his bed with his leg crossed, looking at the young man with a smile on his face. No, Mr. K did not physically touch that young man. It wasn't on the cameras. The witness said that they didn't see. Like, Mr. K did not touch the guy at all during that time. Mr. K told the lieutenant that he take full responsibility of what happened to the guy, because basically he put some kind of spell or root or something on the man and fucked up the man's skin. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. The lieutenant was kind of like nervous, and you could see it, like we could see it as she was telling us this, but she was just like, there's nothing that they can do to Mr. K, because there's no physical evidence or no actual evidence that he physically touched the guy, but one thing I remember Mr. K saying, he didn't say it to me, but I heard him say it to somebody else that he was like getting into an argument with. He was like, I can fuck your life up and never have to touch you. And I think he did just the fuck that, because that young man, he had to be transported out to an actual hospital, and it took months until he came back to like the prison. So I guess the lesson from that is, don't fuck with people who do voodoo. I don't know.
When my mother was younger, there would be this lady that always came in her mother's house. When she came in, she would always ask to use the bathroom. Then she'd leave. Whenever she left, my grandfather got enraged and lost his motherfucking mind. Long story short, she was placing demonic objects in the bathroom. Demonic objects that would influence my grandfather to become enraged. When they threw it out, he calmed down. When she stopped coming over, he stopped getting enraged. Be careful who you let in your goddamn house.
Now, both of your parents were orphans. How did they meet?
Well, as orphans do in church.
Okay.
Their godfather, or I should say, like their godfather, was the evangelist in town. He was the bishop. His name is Bishop W.C. Griffin, and he became the bishop of that northwest half of America. Bishop Blake in L.A. took over for him. I mean, in a way, I'm from church royalty, if you look at it that way. I mean, he was a really heavy dude, but then they were just in the dust bowl of New Mexico, and it was a very Southern Gothic existence. My grandmother was a witch. She died in witchcraft. My father started to preach and was ordained since he was 6 years of age. They said he was a special child, that he literally would sit on a porch and people would come up, and before he could even walk, he would stand up, do scripture, and then go back to playing.
Wow.
My father, who was prone to exaggeration and, as to say, straight up lying, would say some of these stories, but my mother, who was not, said, no, Erica, it was very true.
Wow.
And they went around in a car, and they would go on reservations or wherever they were called, live in people's garages, and he was a healer. They would bring him in, and what would happen, there would be a few people in the audience at first. They would pitch a tent, and then he would pray, do something, and then everybody would heal. Everybody would hear about a person who was healed, who they knew their whole life had some ailment or sickness.
Wow.
And then the next night, there would be tons of people overflowing, Indian, Mexican, white, black, to see this young healer. That was my dad.
And that's crazy because your dad got sick at early, 35.
Right.
Wow.
He got sick.
Nobody could heal him?
It's funny. He died. They gave him a church in East New York. And before he died, I made some peace with him because he wasn't the kindest person. And he said he wished that that God had healed him, and he always wondered why. Sorry. And I wondered too.
I always you said so much that I wanted to, like, first of all, your aunt being a witch.
Yeah, my grandmother.
Being a witch.
His mother was a witch.
And
She
you
would
said
go
she
down and
died
get
from
goof with
witchcraft?
us. Well, she would go. Listen, she had a restaurant. Black people, we do so many things, catering and all that. So back in the day, you really didn't have a life job. You would do things, and she had a little cafe, a hole in the wall, and she would put dust over the door, so when people came in, the bell would ring and dust would fall on it.
Oh no!
Yes, they called it goofer dust. Well, right across the street was her competitor, and they would have goofer dust too. So she would go back and forth to down deep south like New Orleans, all
Carolina,
that,
New
deep,
Orleans,
where you're from, and go get stronger and stronger formulas.
Dust.
Well, one time she came back, and by the way, she would just leave my father, so he'd just be on the streets. One time she came back, and Mexican family took him in, and he didn't even remember English, and they begged her to let him stay. Let Roberto stay, please, Roberto. They called him Roberto, and she took him. But she came back, and they said she was all twisted up with her head in between her legs, barking like a dog.
Wow.
Ooh, that voodoo, that root, boy, I'm telling you, have you coughing up frogs.
And they said that the women in the church went to go get my eventual godfather, which was William Griffith, and he came, saw it, he left 3 days, he went and they fast, and they pray, and then they come back, and then they laid hands on her, and they got her through it, and this is the story now.
Wow.
So I'm just telling you what they got her through it, and when she came out of it, he says, daughter, the Lord told me to tell you that if you go back, you'll come back in a box. No, Rev, I promise, I gave this up, I'm not gonna give it to you. He said, I'm just telling you what the Lord told me to tell you. And that my father's last memory of his mother is her getting in a car, a red Cadillac, because her boyfriend's name was Red, and he would just drive through and take her away. And him begging her, please, Mom, don't go. Don't worry, Robert, I'll be back. And 2 weeks later, they brought her home in a box.